All right. Thank you to those that are here. We're getting ready to get into our Bible study tonight. I appreciate you being a part of it. Uh, we're going to finally take a step past this laying a foundation and actually start getting into the meat of the question of what is wisdom. So we're going to look at a part of it that maybe is a little bit controversial, my stance on it, just because I don't know anybody else who would define it with these exact terms. Even though you clearly have to believe some of what I'm going to say because the Bible defines wisdom this way. I just don't know anybody would put it in the words that I'm going to put it in. So it's not that it's controversial, it's just that it's not normally the language that somebody would use. So that's what we're going to get into tonight as we start discussing what is wisdom. We won't be going beyond wisdom itself tonight, so don't really need to get too much into the concepts around it. I will go ahead and bring up the chart just because I normally start a video with that. So, all right, so we start our video with a chart. We've done a overview of this before. We've also talked about the fear of the Lord, unbelief, how that's really the heart of everything, that where you're going to reside in this is going to come from that. We've discussed the heart and its part in all of this, that wisdom and understanding or foolishness and scornfulness are matters of the heart. We've discussed the mind and its role in all of this, and how that knowledge and simplicity, because the mind is the seat of information, it's where you store all of that. The heart's where you process it and understand it, but you store it within the mind. That's where knowledge and simplicity are going to reside at. So that's kind of your overview of things. Fear of the Lord, of course, and unbelief being the beginning of every path, no matter which direction you're going to go. Your worldview is entirely going to be founded on whether or not you view there being a God or whether you view that there is no God. So that's the unbelief and fear of the Lord part of all of this. Now, if anybody doesn't know, that's a chart that I made. It's nothing definitive or special. It's just something that I made years ago to try to show the relationships of some of these things. Maybe I should throw it back up there for just a second as we're going into wisdom tonight. So you'll note, if you look at wisdom on there, that the top side of the fear of the Lord, you have the heart, that blue area there. You have a heart that's been touched by the fear of the Lord will lean into wisdom and understanding, because it will, as you view a world with God as the creator, it will help to produce wisdom and understanding into the heart. Then we see that as wisdom grows, it will lean towards sound wisdom. And as we go deeper in this, we'll discuss the differences between those two. And as understanding grows, it produces humility. When the two of those things come in together, it produces prudence. So that's just a little bit of foundation for the direction we're going now. We're going to be looking more to understand wisdom and understanding. We'll see if we do the whole blue area or if we work our way around the middle portion, that middle hexagon or whatever. We'll work our way around that probably first instead of doing the blue area first. I don't know. We'll have to see. The way they all relate is it's kind of hard to jump from one to the other or any of it, because it all is one big concept that all comes together in the end. Now, having said that, our text passage for today is going to be Proverbs 1. And I am just trying to jump right into it today. I don't want to drag any feet on it. This will not be the only lesson we do on what wisdom is, like the actual question, what is wisdom? We'll probably spend a little bit of time, especially as we define knowledge and understanding, and then comparing them and how they all link together. There'll probably be quite a little bit of time invested into this particular area. But I want to start with something that God helped me with early into this study, when I was really getting into trying to understand what is wisdom. Because then again, the basic definitions for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding are this. These are your three types of intelligence. Wisdom and understanding, of course, being on the side of the fear of the Lord. Knowledge being on the side of just someone whose mind is knowledgeable, someone who has an educated mind. Now, having said that, wisdom is the hardest of those to define. Knowledge is easy and understanding is easy. In fact, they're so easy to define that it almost sounds sarcastic when you give the definition, because knowledge is what you know. The first letters of the word tell you what it means. Knowledge is what you know. Understanding also is almost sarcastic. It's the ability to understand. It's the ability to take information that's been given to you, break it down, and understand what it means. You'll see there's some some places where wisdom and understanding, you're really going to see some areas where it's hard to find the line where one stops and the other begins, because they're so very much linked. And I made the comparison in the beginning that anytime you have something that's made of three parts, there's always going to be two that are very closely connected and one that is dramatically different. So for us as a body, soul, and spirit, the body, there's no question about what's different between a body and a soul and a spirit. The body's very different. Soul and spirit, on the other hand, sometimes it's hard to define where one stops and the other begins. They're so closely knitted that it's hard to define that. When you look at the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost, it's quite easy to distinguish the differences between what is the ministry and what is the purpose. What is the Son doing and what is the Father doing? What is the Son doing and what is the Holy Spirit? The Son is, Christ is the easiest to define the differences out of in those. But when I start asking you to define the differences between the Holy Spirit and the Father, yeah, there's difference. It's clearly different, but it's harder. There's some places where when you start describing one, it almost sounds like you're describing the other in parts. Now, obviously, there's plenty of differences because you can preach entire messages on that kind of stuff. You can talk about it and study it. And that's what we're doing here with wisdom and understanding, is that they're so closely linked. They both, grow within the heart, that there are going to be a lot of similarities, but there are differences. There are things that can be defined as a difference within them. So knowledge is, of course, the information you have accumulated. Understanding is the ability to understand that information, to know what it means, to take it in and process it. Wisdom, my easiest definition, the best one I know for actually defining wisdom and what it is, would be that wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge, to take the knowledge and not just understand what it means, but understand how to use it. To take the applications and the implications and all this stuff that would come from it. So as we still have people coming in, I see people still commenting, saying hey and all of that in the comments. So let me just once again say hey to everybody who's here and welcome you to be part of the study. We're going to be in Proverbs 1 and verse 3 is going to be our primary verse for what we're talking about. So if you haven't found a place there, I encourage you to do that. But if I just tell you that wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge, to take what you know and then use it, to do something with it, that I think alone is enough. I think to me, having listened to a lot of people give their definitions, having studied it, having really thought about this and trying to come up with a good definition, I don't know that there's anything better to define it with. Because, for example, I had a friend who was a very brilliant man who would always define wisdom as being, as seeing things from God's perspective. And he was very set that was the right definition. So I never would argue with him or debate it. I think he even got it behind me one time when I preached and corrected me, or not corrected me, but, kind of come in and push that in afterwards. And he wasn't wrong. I don't disagree with him, but it's not entirely fair to say wisdom is seeing things from God's perspective, because the Bible defines itself that there is more than one type of wisdom. I mean, you think of James, there's a wisdom from above, and then there's the wisdom from below. He talks about the wisdom from earthly wisdom being that which is, or wisdom from below as being that which is earthly, sensual, and devilish. Wisdom from above, which in reality, you're going to start to see at some point that becomes sound wisdom. That is wisdom that is actually has a much longer list of what it is, but it's gentle, easy to be entreated, and so forth. But the point being is even the Bible tells you that not everything that falls under the umbrella of what it means to have wisdom in the heart necessarily means you're lining up 100% with God's point of view. And I think that's one of the problems, is just because wisdom's good and it's the right direction for your life, sometimes we automatically assume that it must then be perfect. But there are layers and levels and places in which you can be in terms of how wise you are. And the more you line up with God, the more sound that wisdom is, the more safe and secure it is. But wisdom in itself cannot necessarily be defined as seeing things from God's perspective, because it's not entirely true. It's a nice thought. It's a better definition for sound wisdom than it is wisdom, but it's there. I've heard others, though some are not worth mentioning. A lot of them are people who just don't really seem to understand the concepts, because they'll define wisdom with words that really should be reserved for knowledge or understanding. Now, having said that, one of the things that come to me when I was still early in my study of this, and it has stuck with me, that at one time this would have been my primary definition until I have landed on defining it as being able to apply knowledge. However, I still stick with this, and I think this is what we're going to talk about tonight, is Proverbs 1:3. Now, I want to start reading from verse 1 just to give you a little bit of the context. It says, "The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice and judgment and equity." Now, we already defined that instruction is one of the ways in which we receive knowledge. There's education and there's experience. There's instruction and there is, well, experience. Because he defines the two people in this chapter who lack knowledge as being the simple and the young, those who have not experienced much and those who have not been educated. So we'll talk more about that in one of the coming weeks. But we understand then that what he's telling us is that his goal, according to verse 2, is so that we can know wisdom, that we'll know what wisdom is, and instruction, that will increase in knowledge, and to perceive the words of understanding. So it's almost funny the way he says it. So we'll start to understand what understanding is. We'll start to see it and get it. Then in verse 3, it says to receive the instruction of wisdom. That means to know what wisdom is. And it's part of a list, but the following points in the list are justice and judgment and equity. And these three words are very interesting to me because justice and judgment almost always appear together in terms of justice. Now, judgment appears by itself a lot. The word judgment is one of your more common words in the Bible. I mean, like 500, 600, 700 times it's used. Justice, on the other hand, is not so much. It's less than 30, I think. And probably 20 of those are in a verse with judgment, because justice and judgment always go together. Equity doesn't appear much. It's probably less than 10 times in the Bible, and it's normally partnered with judgment, justice, or I'll show you this is a word that's used almost synonymous with justice in just a moment. It's usually partnered with one of those words. Now, I'm saying that to show that this list, these three things are almost always with the exception of judgment, because it's used a lot more because it also has other meanings and stuff beyond just what he's talking about here. But with the exception of judgment, these other two almost always appear with one of the other three. They're very much linked. I mean, they're at the heart of it, it's very clear that these three things go together somehow. The way that verse is written tells you that part of knowing wisdom includes knowing what is judgment, and what is equity. Or what is justice, what is judgment, what is equity. So understanding that means that while it's the way this is written, you could still walk away and say, I don't think justice, judgment, or equity fit within the definition of wisdom. And if you said that, I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm not going to argue with you. It's fine. However, I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to show you why tonight. Because while these words are not used all the time when you talk about wisdom, they are used quite commonly in connection with wisdom as well. And the very concepts of what they are very much attached to wisdom. So what I'm going to try to do, if time allows for it, is to take each of these three words, show you what they mean, and then show you how wisdom exemplifies that. And that way we can show that somewhere at the heart of what wisdom is it's made up then itself of three parts. And that's not strange. You think about it in terms of like the universe, for example, you have time, space, matter. Three parts make up the universe. Each of those then can be broken down into three parts or ideas or phases. So time, you have past, present, future. Space, you have length, width, depth. Matter, you have the three phases: liquid, solid, gas. You have the threes break down, and they break down to where you see three continually seems to be the way things tend to be made up. So the idea that wisdom, if you're going to dissect it, being the most complicated and most important of these concepts, would break down itself into three categories is not strange. And I do think it does that. I do think that this is still the more complicated definition to what wisdom is. And that's why maybe I'm making the introduction to it complicated, because if I tell you wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge, you take that and you accept it and you don't argue with me. If I tell you that wisdom is justice, judgment, and equity, I have to explain that. That's not just a statement that I can say it and then walk away, because it takes a lot of explanation to understand why I believe that. So that's what we're going to try to do tonight. I'm going to try to give them to you as reasonably as I can. So before I go start trying to define what the words are, I want to show you even yet another verse, because it does matter to what I want to show, and that is Proverbs 2 and verse 9. Proverbs 2 and verse 9. Now, this is about wisdom. This is, talking about if you'll receive wisdom and so forth. It says, then shalt thou understand righteousness and judgment and equity, yea, every good path. So in this particular verse, you're being told that if I can simplify what's coming forward, if we'll receive wisdom, if we'll open up our hearts to it, bow our ears to it, and submit ourselves to wisdom and give wisdom the place to grow and work in our heart, then you'll have the ability to understand righteousness and judgment and equity. Now, the reason why I accept that righteousness and justice get swapped out here is because for a large part of your Bible, that's true. The words righteous and justice get swapped out a lot because they're not entirely interchangeable, but they are, they're close enough that you can swap them out for a lot of things. There are places where one can't replace the other, but in general, they are synonymous. So to be just, that's to be legally correct. To be righteous is to be right with. So in terms of how you swap these two words is if you're talking about a legal matter, then probably righteous, you probably want to use just. If you are talking about just to be right with someone, to be right at the heart of it, you probably want to use righteous. So in terms of wisdom and what he wants to convey about wisdom, the two words can be swapped and it doesn't matter because we're not talking about legal issues and that kind of stuff yet. So you can swap them back and forth and you'll be okay. And that's what you'll notice is that justice gets swapped back and forth with justice and righteousness all the time. Now, let's define then what is justice. First time justice or judgment appear in the Bible is Genesis chapter 18. And we'll start in verse 18, read verse 19 as well. It says, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. So it's just talking about, knowing that Abraham's going to do right and so forth. But you have the first use of the word justice or judgment in this place. And the idea is that Abraham is somebody who is going to do justice, which in that set, I understand you still don't have a full definition. So let me give you the basic idea of what justice is. Justice is that which is just. A lot of these words, I'm not trying to be a sarcastic person, so let me be clear. When I give you such a simple definition, it's not out of sarcasm. It's one, so you can remember it, and the other is because a lot of times it really is that easy, that you're just taking the word, the root word, which is just, and then what does it mean when I add the ICE to it? It is that which is just. Justice is that which is just. So in terms of judgment, because again, these two words, almost every time justice is used in the Bible, judgment is in the same verse. And in fact, I guess would be not the next time, but the third time that the word justice is used would be 2 Samuel 8:15. So let me give you that, and I'll say some more about it. It says, and David reigned over all Israel, and David executed just judgment and justice unto all people. That verse helps you to see maybe a little better what the word actually means. That the actual, just base definition of what justice is. Justice is that which is just. And in terms of this, he's saying as a king, it was his job to be a judge. And as a judge, he made sure that everybody received what was just according to the law. So as people come and he had to deal with people, he had to answer matters and correct problems and so forth. He always made sure he did what was proper, what was legally correct by these people. And you see, when you swap it out with righteous, same idea. He always did what was right by people. Whatever was right for them, that's what he did. Or whatever was the correct answer in that situation, that's what he did. So the baseline definition of justice and the way we would normally use it would be that justice is receiving what you deserve. It's receiving what is correct. It is, whatever's proper, that's what happens. Now, justice is used for a little bit more than that. 2 Samuel 15 is probably about the fourth time I think the word is used. I'll go ahead and give you that one. 2 Samuel 15 verse 4 says, Absalom said, moreover, oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man may hath any suit or case, that hath any suit, any man which hath any suit or cause, might come unto me, and I would do him justice. Absalom saying, if I were made the king and people came to me with their problems, it would be good, because then I would do what was right by them. I would do what was just, whatever was proper. That's what I would do. So you see, that's how the word's typically used. That's what it means to execute justice. It means you execute doing that which is right. You make sure that the wicked are punished and the righteous are rewarded, and so forth. That's what it means when you see the term executing judgment. Now, or executing justice. Judgment is similar. Now, saying that, where justice becomes connected to wisdom is a little bit different, and that it's more of the idea of having a sense of justice. That part of the definition of wisdom is because you are now learning how to apply knowledge, how to take the things you know and then understand what to do with them, understanding how to use them. Because that's where wisdom starts. Where wisdom starts to come into this, is it's applying the knowledge that you have. It creates within you a moral compass, a integrity is the word I would normally like to use, so that within the heart of the person who has wisdom, because they take this knowledge and they begin to use it. So, for example, someone who really knows the law, it's not hard for them to automatically just have a natural reaction to what is right or what is wrong. They automatically are appalled at that which is wrong and pleased by that which is good, because they know the law and they understand it. They know what it means and how it should be applied. So, for example, I pick up my Bible and I'm reading God's law, and he's talking about someone who stole something, that if they get caught, they have to pay it back so many times. Some people might be upset by that, but for me, I read it and that makes sense to me. It's not to call me a wise person, but just bear with me. That it makes sense to me because I understand why God's saying this. The knowledge and all that's there, it makes sense. I can apply it. I can use it. When you go to his laws, the ones I talk about, for example, about the value of human life, and you start talking about killing an animal because it killed a person, well, there's a lot of people in the world who don't think that that's right. They don't see that as wisdom. People don't see the death penalty as wisdom. I've heard people argue about how it's ridiculous to kill somebody for killing, how that's hypocritical. But in reality, God set within his law to do that so that you put a stop to it, so that that person doesn't proceed to kill, and that person doesn't teach other people to kill. He set the law with the value of a human life versus that of an animal, so that if an animal kills a person, the animal is to be killed, because then it teaches that the life of the person is worth more, and you stop an animal from killing further. He also included within that law that if the owner of the animal knew the animal was likely to do this, that the owner was also to be killed, because then that makes people take responsibility, that they don't just treat their property as if it's worth more than somebody's life. So you see, what I'm getting at is that as you hear this information, you can take two different people and set them down. Take someone who has a very worldly way of thinking, the way of thinking that the world would promote today, and tell them that if a dog kills, bites a child or hurts a child or kills a child, that dog should be killed. And there are people within the world today that their, let's say, wisdom, we're going to see as we go through the study, it's foolishness. But their way in which they take knowledge and apply it would tell them that you're being evil for doing that, because you shouldn't punish the dog. The dog messed up. You should give it another chance. Send it to be trained and all this kind of stuff. But the wisdom is being presented to you here from the Bible. The information being given to you is that if that dog has bit, hurt, killed, so forth, is that you cannot give it a chance to continue. You have to put a stop to it and make sure nobody else gets hurt, because the value of that person is worth more than that of the animal. So there's one group's going to be offended when you say that. There's another group who's going to be able to take that information and understand why God said that. Because a lot of what I'm including when I say that the value of the life is more important, you have to figure that out when you read the law. It's not, he doesn't just state that plainly within the law. That's stuff that you pick up as you have the ability to take that knowledge and apply it, and take that knowledge and then take those same principles. And when you're faced with a challenge that God doesn't directly address, you can apply it. You can understand. Because, for example, in the law, he says if a bull gores somebody, if it hits them with the horn and kills them. But we're talking about a dog, attacking a child. God doesn't specify anything about a dog attacking a child in his law. He talks about a bull, or an ox, actually, even, I think. But we're able to use wisdom to take the law that's given, apply it, understand what it means and how it affects us, and then apply it to other situations. That's where this sense of justice comes in, this ability, this moral compass that allows you to see what is evil, what is good, is because as you have the knowledge that's given to you, and wisdom allows you to apply that, it creates within you a natural compass to point you to do that which is good and away from that which is evil. So where does the Bible say that wisdom does that? Well, the answer would be, for example, Proverbs 14:16. Let's see, Proverbs 14 and verse 16 says this: a wise man feareth and departeth from evil, but the fool rageth and is confident. So when the fool sees something evil, and we're trying not to get too much into, we're not trying to, actually, Nick's talking about on the judgment. I'll get to that in just a minute. But when the fool sees evil, and we'll do the contrast with wisdom and foolishness more as we define what foolishness is in another lesson. But when a fool sees something that's evil, he's not bothered by it. Doesn't feel like it's in a big deal. He goes on about his way. Sometimes he laughs at things like that. It's not a problem, according to the Bible, for a fool. But when someone who has enough wisdom in their heart to take the law and then know how to apply what God has told us, even to the things he hasn't told us, to know how to connect those dots, to realize if it's evil for one animal to kill a person, it's also evil for this other animal to do it, and so forth. To be able to connect those kind of things and understand that information and then apply it to our lives. As wisdom and understanding are working together for what I'm talking about there. But as wisdom allows you to then apply that, when we see something's evil, we're appalled by it. According to that, we turn away from it. We're fearful of that. We don't want to allow a place for that to grow. And so, according to this, a wise man feareth, and because he is afraid, because he has that fear, he sees things properly, understands what it is, has the right respect, and so forth, all that's attached to that word fear. Then when he sees evil, he departs from it. So according to this, wisdom will turn us away from evil. Proverbs 28:7 also says that whoso keepeth the law is a wise son, but he that is a companion of riotous men shameth his father. So you see that within there, we're told that someone who keeps the law is a wise son, meaning that he then has wisdom in his heart, that this is the actions of a wise person. This is what you should expect a wise person to do, would be to keep the law. So you see that there is a connection with wisdom in that it pushes us to that which is right and deters us from that which is evil. It pushes us away from it. So it promotes one and pushes away the other. And so that's exactly the way the word justice is used in this sense. Because again, there's the sense of carrying out justice, there's a sense of executing it and all of that. But in the sense of how it applies to your inner thoughts and your wisdom, it's a sense of justice. It's something within you that just helps you to realize that's not right. They shouldn't do that. We shouldn't accept this. This is evil. We can't just go along with this. That's justice. Now, judgment, Nick's already given me an illustration for it, so I'll try to weave that into what I'm getting ready to talk about. But judgment is really an ability to discern. It's an ability to take the information you're given and discern it. It's not just in regards to like legal matters and what's right and wrong, like what you see. Justice is more of a moral compass. Judgment is a compass in any situation. It's the ability that you have two roads in front of you and you have to choose, do I want to go left or do I want to go right? And then weighing the information that's been given to you to make a proper decision. It's just that ability to discern, to make decisions, to process the information that way. Now, we understand that's going back to the first use of both of them. That was in Genesis 18, and we're being told that Abraham's expected to have a moral compass, to the integrity to do that which is right, but also the judgment to be able to, make the right decisions. The next time you see judgment used would be Exodus 12:12. So Exodus 12 and verse 12 says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and I will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord." Now, this is where you see judgment has a different, like a different level of the definition. Because it all fits within the same wheelhouse, but there's a different level. And this is leaning towards the area where people get offended. Like when people get upset about the idea of judging someone, it's because they don't understand. It's not that to look at something and weigh it and see if it's right or wrong. God never condemns that. God commands that we do that we look at stuff and we, measure the parts and, compare it to his word and his law and determine whether it's right or wrong, good or evil, so forth. God commands his people to do that. That's never condemned in the Bible. So for me to look at something that somebody's doing and say, that's wrong, you can't do that, that's evil. This world looks at that and says, oh, you're judging me, you're not allowed to judge me. But that's not at all what God's talking about when he condemns judgment. What God condemns when he condemns judgment is us condemning someone else. And what I mean by that is when you look at verses that are against judgment, because there's a few that are, while there's also a lot that are for it. The ones that are against it are against me condemning somebody to hell, me saying that this person doesn't deserve the gospel, this person can never get saved, this person isn't worth my time, that kind of stuff and so forth. So those are the places where God is against it. And that's what you're seeing here with Exodus, is God's taking it upon himself that he has the right to pass this kind of judgment, to say, okay, tonight we're going to execute those who deserve to be executed. We're going to give them the punishment for their crime. That is something that God takes upon himself to do, and especially in terms of eternal judgment. Now, Leviticus 19:15 show that this is something I want to bring out too, that's a little bit important to show you a little bit of the difference between justice and judgment, because these two are quite similar. Like I say, anytime you got a group of three, two are going to be very closely connected. In this case, it's justice and judgment. Equity is in a world all of its own. But Leviticus 19:15 says, "You shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Thou shalt not respect the person of the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty, but in righteousness shalt thou judge thy neighbor." Now, what's funny about that is everything that follows after that colon, thou shalt not respect the person of the poor and so forth. That's actually equity. He's telling you to have equity in your judgment. Unrighteousness would be going against justice. So you're seeing how even there's a whole lesson you could do about how these things work together just out of that one verse. But what's important is to note this: justice, according to the Bible, can be perverted. There is a passage in Job that says God is not going to pervert justice, that he's not going to mess that up. So justice can be perverted. Like someone can know what's right and then try to twist the words and change it to make you feel like you're doing right while you're actually doing wrong. Judgment, on the other hand, can just be unrighteous. You can weigh the information and still make the wrong decision. You can compare what all is being said to you and still walk away having made the wrong decision. So judgment is just taking the information that's presented to you and measuring it out, considering it, and then making a proper decision. Justice is a moral integrity, a compass within you that, based off of your knowledge and understanding of what is right and wrong, is pointing you into that which is right. Now, Nick he brought up a good illustration for judgment that I wanted to mention, is about Solomon. Solomon was a judge as a king. And one of the great examples of Solomon using his wisdom, because Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. So one of the great examples of him using his wisdom, and then especially this category of judgment, in his decision making is the people coming to him and him, knowing how to bring it out of them and so forth. So, for example, you have the story of the two mothers coming in. They're both claiming the baby's theirs, but obviously only one of them is the mother. And so he says, okay, then we'll just cut the baby in half. You each can have a half. And the real mother speaks up and says, that, okay, just give her the baby, don't hurt the baby. And then Solomon says, okay, that's the real mother because she actually cares about the life of the baby. All of that is judgment. There's justice in there as well, of course, obviously. But all of that is such a great example of judgment because all of that is you're seeing a man taking his wisdom, his ability to apply the knowledge he has to, take it and use it and so forth. And he's saying, I know that any mother who really loves her child would never let her child be hurt. She would rather somebody else have the baby than the baby die. I know that this other lady, whatever her motives are, her pride or whatever it is, she would rather not, because obviously we have an understanding that had she been proven wrong in the court of law, she could have been killed for this false accusation and for claiming the baby was hers. Whoever's a liar is not going to admit it. They're not, no matter what, they're not going to accept the punishment that would come with this. Whereas the real mother would be willing to die for her child. He's saying, I know that. So let me then apply that and use that information. And that's what he did. He applied it. He put them to the test. Once the woman spoke up, he said, okay, this is the real mother because I know that a real mother would die for her baby. That's judgment. That's him taking the information, everything is being fed in and processing it, and then making a proper decision based off of it. So there's judgment. Where do we see in the Bible that judgment is part of wisdom? Well, actually a lot. We could have done a lot of verses on this because wisdom, the easiest of these three things that I can connect to wisdom is judgment, because we know that part of wisdom is the ability to take the information that we have and process it and know how to use it. So the ability to make decisions definitely falls under the category of wisdom. But thank you, Nick, for the illustration there, because that saved me having to come up with one on my own. Proverbs 9 is one of the verses I want to give. Proverbs 9 and verse 8 says, reprove not a scorner lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man and he will love thee. So the contrast being made is that someone who's a scorner, someone who thinks they know everything, you can rebuke them and they're not going to care. They're not going to take that information. They're not going to grow from it. They're not going to learn anything. But if you take a wise man and you correct him, he has the ability to then look at what you've said, consider the information, and then make that judgment, to process that and realize, okay, you're right. Or even if you're wrong, to at least appreciate what you've done so that he will love thee. But a wise man has the ability to take that stuff and use it. I'll even give you another verse to help tie justice back to it in verse 9. It says, give instruction to a wise man and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man and he will increase in learning. So you see there that a just man and a wise man are almost being put in, in synonym, that they're being put as, okay, that if I teach someone who's wise, he'll be more wise. If I teach a man who's just, he will also be more wise because he will learn more. He'll increase in learning. So you're seeing that the way the words are used is to show that there's some synonymous nature in them. As I said, I do believe it's part of the definition. Proverbs 21 and verse 11, also going to be a similar idea to what I just brought out. It says, when the scorner is punished, the simple is made wise, and when the wise is instructed, he receiveth knowledge. Now, this proves what I'm trying to say a little better than the last verse. I just had to bring out the part about justice there as well. But this proves a little bit better that when you take someone who's simple, someone who just hasn't really been educated, doesn't really know as much, someone who hasn't maybe experienced some things, and you let them see someone who is a scorner, someone who doesn't want to learn, thinks they know it all, that they get punished, they're able to then take that stimuli, that information that's being given to them, that they just saw. In fact, this is going to sound bad to use my child as an example of this, but Josiah, for example, has the ability that when Emily gets a spanking, because Emily is the one who doesn't want to learn, doesn't want to listen, of mine most commonly she is. So when Emily gets a spanking because she doesn't want to listen to something, if Josiah also has been doing that thing, usually he'll stop immediately because he just took that in. He made a judgment and realized that if I keep doing this, I'm also going to get a spanking. It's that ability to take the information being fed in, make a decision based on it, and then correct course and so forth. And so you also see when the wise instructed, he receiveth knowledge. When you teach him something, he receives it. Then Proverbs 10 and verse 21, this is about the fool. And so we'll, of course, bring it back up when we talk about foolishness probably, but I wanted to bring it out here tonight as well. It says, the lips of the righteous feed many, but the fools die for want of wisdom. You also have that there's another verse where it says that the people die for a lack of judgment because of the fact that people aren't willing to make those judgments. They're not willing to make decisions and choose righteousness and so forth, that people die for a lack of judgment. There's another verse in the Bible that contrasts well against this one. But here you have this idea that a fool's lack, a want for wisdom, the fact that they don't have it, it's something that is destructive to them because they're not willing to judge and see that which is right and that which is wrong. So you see, wisdom very much exemplifies justice and judgment so far. That it's something that's helping you to make not just decisions, but even right decisions based off of the information you have. Equity is, to me, my favorite one of these. It is the one that the least is said about in terms of using the word equity, but the concept is there, and it's very much connected to judgment, to wisdom. And so equity, the first time you see the word used is Psalm 98 and verse 9. Psalm 98 verse 9 says, before the Lord, he cometh, let me actually pick up so you have some context. It says, let's say from verse 7, let the sea roar and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. Let the floods clap their hands. Let the hills be joyful together before the Lord. For he cometh to judge the earth, and with righteousness shall he judge the world, and the people with equity. So the idea of equity is it simply means to be impartial, to not be a respect of persons in your judgment. And so we know God's not a respect of persons. In fact, almost anytime you look up the phrase respect of persons in the Bible, it's talking about God not being a respecter of persons. So we know God's not a respecter of persons, that when he judges based off of what is right and what is wrong. He takes the information and bases his decision off of what's right, not off of emotional decisions, not off of his opinion of a person, but off of that which is right. And that's what it's teaching in that verse, is that when God makes his judgment and his decisions, it's without respect of person, without partiality, without emotional attachments and so forth. It's off of what is right. That's how God makes his decisions. Now, that's not to say that he doesn't let his love for people, make him decide to have mercy. But we also know that God chooses to have mercy when it's the right thing, when it's good, when it's proper. He chooses stuff for long when it's good, when it's proper. So it's not an emotional decision, even though emotions are attached to it. Now, where do we then see that wisdom or that equity and wisdom go together? Let's first go to Proverbs 17:26 to learn a little more about equity. Then I'll give you my main verse for this. Proverbs 17 and verse 26. It says, also to punish the just is not good, nor to strike princes for equity. So he's saying if you punish someone who's right, someone who hasn't done anything wrong, it's not good. Why should I punish someone who's legally correct and done nothing wrong? It's not good. Nor to strike princes for equity. That's to say that it's just to go ahead and strike the prince, to give the prince a beating just to be fair. He says it's not good either. It's not good that you would take somebody, and say, okay, I'm going to beat this person just for the sake of making sure everything's equal here. That's what equity and equal, you're going to see it's a very similar word. But just to make sure everything's equal and fair, and that everybody's getting what they get, or, that you're somehow either your respect of persons or even some ways your lack thereof make you to strike someone else. That's what he's saying is not good. But the main verse for this thing about equity is such a good verse. Proverbs 24 and verse 23 says, these things also belong to the wise. It is not good to have respect of persons in judgment. So you want a verse that tells you equity is part of wisdom, that's it. It tells you that when you're making your decisions, when you're judging the information that's been given to you, and justice is speaking in your ear to say this is right, your judgment's taking all the information and measuring it to make the right decision. Equity is over here, and equity is saying, look, I know you're mad at the person, but that doesn't change what's right. You still have to listen to justice. Equity is over here saying that, look, I know this one's your friend, and so it's natural that you would want to take their side, but you have to do what's right. You have to make the right decision. Equity allows us to separate ourselves from the equation. It is allowing you to take the information and turn it into a math problem instead of an emotional problem, instead of something where we're basing it off of our feelings, our connections, and so forth. Because as humans, naturally, when we're making a judgment, we're making a decision, we're always going to have some respect of persons. So because we like somebody more, we're going to be more inclined to take their side. Because it's my family, I'll be more inclined to assume they're right. But equity allows us to step back and say, well, actually, what does the information say? Forget that I'm upset. Forget that I like this person more. Forget anything about my feelings, my opinions, my emotions, whatever that might affect the outcome of this decision. Forget all of that. That's what equity allows you to do. And that's what you'll see. Really wise decision making reflects that. A wise decision maker is going to be someone who, when they make their decisions, it's not based off of their opinion of you. It's not based off of any emotional side of this. Like, they're not afraid of offending somebody or so forth. That's not going to make the decision for them. They'll take themselves out of the equation completely, so that the entire question is not about what I feel, what I think, what I want. It's what is right. And that's the beauty of how, when you see these things of the definition of wisdom, it comes together. That you have one of these acts as a compass, as a true north. I mean, you understand that's how a compass works. A compass points to the magnetic point, to the strongest magnetic point. So obviously we're in the northern hemisphere, true north. That compass is always going to point you to that strong magnetic pull of the North Pole. That's what it's trying to do for you. So justice is always pointing you to what is right. And in its case, its magnetic pole is the word of God. What's right. But for us, we understand the word of God is just, the word of God is true. So its magnetic point is that as you build the knowledge within your heart to know better and better what is just, what is right, it's always going to be pointing you back to that and pulling you towards that and directing you that, look, in your heart, this is right. That's what justice is going to let you do with the information you have as you try to apply that information to your life. Judgment is going to let you then take, especially when you start talking about things that fall within a more gray area where it's not so cut and dry, black and white. Judgment is going to allow you to take that information, consider it a little more, discern it, make some decisions, weigh it out, all that kind of stuff. It allows you to do that part of it so that you can make the right decision. But equity comes in and makes sure that even after all that's been done, after you've broken down the information and made some judgments about it, after you've been pointed to the moral north, equity is going to come in and make sure you're not letting yourself come in and mess up the judgment, that you're not letting your opinions come in, because we're always so naturally inclined to take the sides of the people that we like, regardless of whether they're right. I see so many people get involved in arguments because their friend is in an argument and don't even stop to consider that, well, my friend's actually wrong. I shouldn't be defending them. They're wrong. We have to stand for what is right. And these parts of what wisdom is allow us to step back and just make the decision based entirely off of what is right. To take the information we have, apply it, and make the right decision, not based on emotion or any of these other things that might hinder us. So that's my definition of wisdom. I say it's a much more complicated definition than to say it's the ability to apply knowledge, but it shows you how wisdom allows you to apply knowledge. It's more that it's like if I show you a car and say, well, this is a thing, it's an automobile. It's something that will allow you to travel from one point to another more quickly. That's a fine definition. It's good enough. That's all you need. However, if I start breaking it down and explaining to you about the internal combustion and about tires and going through these kind of things, that's kind of what we've done tonight. Is instead of just telling you that a car is something that moves you from one place to another, we're now defining it for you as a your machine that has 4 wheels that can do this, and has all these features and so forth. That's what we've tried to do for wisdom tonight, is to walk you through how justice, judgment, and equity explain to you the inner workings and the mechanics of it. So if you have a question, feel free to ask. I need to start reining these things in because normally would have tried to finish this lesson by around 9 minutes ago. But I apologize for that. It's also normally I would have probably tried to do each of these things individually. However, tonight I just felt led to do them all together. So having said that, if you have a question, please do feel free to ask it. I will try to answer it as best I can, as quickly as I can. If there are no questions, then we'll look at wrapping things up here soon. But I'll give you just a moment, as I know it takes a minute to type in a question. There's also a delay. But I hope this all made sense for everybody. I hope you can walk away from that and see why I look at the more biblical definition of wisdom as being these 3 things, these 3 concepts that allow you to make the right decisions and allow you to take the information you've been given and apply that to your lives. By judging it, by applying it through the filter of justice and the filter of equity. So now next week we will either do a little more on wisdom because there's still more to talk about, or I'll just try to weave that into some of the other lessons. If we decide to weave that into some other lessons, then maybe next week we'll talk more about understanding. There's so many ways we can go. Either we'll talk more about understanding, or we can jump to the opposite side of the spectrum to talk about foolishness. To be honest with you, it's hard to know what's best. Now that you have a good definition for wisdom, to focus on that, or to jump to the other side and show you its opposite now, or get all the intelligence out of the way first and then study the unintelligence. But I'll pray about it and make sure we make the right decision. So far, I'm being told there are no questions from anybody. I hope that it's been a help. Hope it makes sense. If it's complicated, like I say, I gave you an easy definition. You can keep that one. You don't have to be able to explain everything that I tried to explain tonight. Maybe you can explain it better than I did. But the easy definition is the ability to apply knowledge. To take the knowledge that you have and apply it to your life and use it. The more complicated definition is that it's justice, judgment, and equity. It's this ability to be pointed and know what's right, to make the decisions that you have to make using the information that's been given to you, and not let your emotions and stuff affect that decision-making process. All right, so I don't see any questions. We'll get ready to close it down then. So even if I went a little bit over, we're still going to close at a good time because I didn't, because I don't have any questions coming in, it seems. Like I say, next week we will I'll bring that chart up real quick. Next week we will either go across from wisdom to come down to foolishness, so that you can study opposites, because sometimes that helps when you can contrast these things which are opposite one to another. Or we'll move sideways to study understanding, because also it helps you to understand each of these a little bit better when you can compare it to the one that's connected to it. That's why I say it's a little bit hard to know which one's the best way to go, because the two things, or all these things, fit so much together. For sure, but before we get to knowledge, we'll probably already move over to study foolishness. Maybe we do wisdom and understanding first, and foolishness and scornfulness, so that you have all these things together as we contrast them. So, all right, then I appreciate somebody's asking if I can give them a copy of the chart. I mean, I can. It's not a problem. I can print it for you. I can give a digital copy probably somehow. But if somebody wants that, I can find a way to make that available to people. Thank you again for being part of the study. Again, I hope everything was a help and that you walk away understanding a little bit better what God looks for in our decision making. Anyways, I look forward to being with everybody tomorrow night in church. I remind you that I think Safania's cooking the meal, that the prayer service from 7 to 7:45 will not be live streamed, but if you have a prayer request, feel sure to give that to me so that I can make sure we pray for you and work you into the prayer time. And then also be sure to join us for the live stream Bible study starting at 7:45. So we thank you for all of that. I want to especially give my greetings to Maria, since she is the one who's far away right now. She's the child who's wandered astray into a far distant land. But thank you for her being here tonight, and I hope everything's going well for you back at your home. So, all right, thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you, everybody. I hope you have a good evening.